Hey guys, this is Kirov speaking, and in today's little dev update we are going to take a pretty deep look at some of those turbo calculations that now have been advancing a lot in the recent weeks, and they are friggin' fantastic. Also, a few little things like visual goodies in this episode, and you're going to love them as well. Apart from that, let's get started with some just team news, and that would be that overall things are looking pretty good right now. Our new hire, as well as lead programmer and so on, who have been onboarded in recent time or are in the onboarding process, are already becoming quite a bit productive. So that's great. Little things added here and there, and overall, things are just going in the right direction. But I think we are going to tackle first things first, and that is turbo calculations. Let's hop right in. I'm going to show you them not in automation because they don't exist in automation just yet, but rather in my little Game Maker Studio 2 project, which I use to prototype them and to visualize what is going on. Welcome to my little turbo simulation. So yes, this is completely made in Game Maker Studio 2, and certainly not what the game engine was made for, but it's working brilliantly. So yes, all of that was coded up by myself, and that is for prototyping the calculations. Last time we did take a look at the calculations as they existed within Excel, or rather Google spreadsheets, and in the meantime they basically at the point when we last talked about a month ago, they hit the point where it was no longer possible to continue on just spreadsheets in there without going a little deeper and actually having iterative processes at work, because otherwise you don't really get the turbo behavior. But so this is what this is for. Full code implementation in the background. This is not a mock-up. This is I can change things like let me up the boost, and it calculates, and then you see oopsie poopsie, the turbo shredded itself at 5,600 RPM. This is not good, Hans. Hans, what have you done? And all these calculations are currently running in like native Game Maker code, and so they're not even properly C compiled. So this is all still a little slow. It takes my very fast computer about a second to run through the calculation for one change of values. So that is just a new setup. It always calculates everything through from scratch. So about a second calculation time, but as soon as you put that into C++, I think this will be quite fast. Probably so fast that this can just be thrown in and it's into the game itself, into automation, and it just works and feels reasonably good, especially if you have the little spinny logo that when it's loading and calculating, that you know it's still busy. But anyway, what do we have here? So we have our compressor map, which you did take a look at in spreadsheet the last time. This is now at a, of course, much higher resolution, where each pixel is an individual calculation for the efficiency of the compressor. Quite complex that, but yes, and there's of course a load of pixels here, which means a load of calculations, and that you often forget like how many pixels there are in an image. Like, okay, this is a resolution of 760 times 560. That doesn't sound like much, but that is 425,600 calculations for like individual ones for the efficiency of the compressor at that point. That's a lot. So just to briefly explain to you what we see here before I'm going to go through all these plots and just show you what they are and tell you what they are, so you know how to make sense of it all and what is happening when I change something. So the compressor map shows you the efficiency of the compressor itself. The greener the color here, the more efficient it is, and you see some color banding or color grouping, and that is very deliberate. Those are whole percentage steps you see here. So the center one is 72%. 71%, the yellow here is 70, and then it becomes more orange and such. And overall, this is very orange and yellow because we are in 1970 and the compressors weren't that efficient back then. On the y-axis, we have the pressure ratio that is over the compressor. So if you have an atmosphere at the inlet and you have 2 bars at the outlet, that means you have a pressure ratio that is almost 2. On the other hand, if you have a pressure of 0.5 at the inlet and a pressure of 2 bar at the outlet, that's a pressure ratio of 4. So intake pressure actually matters, and it's being calculated. So on the x-axis, we have compressor mass flow. And mass flow is about proportional to power output. You can roughly, as a rough guidance, you could say that about 10 horsepower per pound per minute. So this here is giving you up to 300-ish horsepower if it's an efficient engine and so on. So yeah, probably less will come out of it because of inefficiencies with the combustion and such. But that's all that. So this is the x-axis. So one interesting thing that happens if you increase boost and you walk through this map is that you go diagonally, because more pressure means more mass flow, and more mass flow is on X. So you increase the pressure and you increase mass flow, so you go diagonally. And that is what happened with Hans back then. Poor Hans. He's always the one who gets blamed for everything. Yes, there you see this, as I increase the boost, it is rising up diagonally as it spools up. And how do I see that? Well, that's the blue line in here. That's this faint blue line. That is the path the engine takes at full throttle through this compressor map as the turbo spools up, which is this part. And then this is the part where the turbo stays on its maximum boost, which you see down here. We're going to talk about that a little later. And then we have these black lines. The thicker black line that is on top here is the absolute mechanical limit of the compressor in terms of the turbo as a whole in terms of RPM. I should probably put that on screen here somewhere, how quick that is, but that will be around 1970, maybe 120,000 for compressor. Yeah, around 120,000 RPM maybe. And then this is the 80% speed line, and this is the 60% speed line. If you compare those to an actual turbo, they are slightly off, but that is something I can tweak a little. And these are placed exactly is immaterial to the calculations. This one is quite accurate in terms of reality. So very very good that. Now let's move forward. What more do we see here? Let's move over to power torque. Well, you know that graph. I don't have to explain it, I guess. But I should mention that the thinner, darker lines, respectively, that is also shaded area, that is the NA engine that I put in. And I've just chosen a really generic flat torque curve model engine, basically, so that I can properly test the turbos on a quite neutral engine, so that I properly see the effect of the turbo rather than the quirks of the engine. And it's certainly not realistic for 1970s, but I don't care. This is just a base engine which I use to do my turbo calcs on. This can easily be switched out, of course, and this is where the automation NA torque curve data would be taken in, and then the turbo calculation would apply. But also, these calculations will partially govern NA engines, as we do have all kinds of temperature and pressure tracking throughout intake and exhaust, and combustion as well. So yes, so power torque curve, and then we have the absolute pressure in bar. This is right now set up to show you some more extreme setups, which we are probably not necessarily going to talk about much today. But pressure up to 6 bar in the turbine could happen. It's not healthy, and can happen. And poor Hans will get blamed for it. Alright, I changed the scale to just be 4 bar instead. I think that's more reasonable. The red line is the... let me see. Yeah, I probably should switch colors there. But the red line is after intercooler pressure. The blue line is the pressure that's right above the red line. Very hard to see here because they're so similar. That is the pressure after the compressor, which of course is at our boost limit, which currently is set to 0.9 bar. So that will be at 1.9 bar absolute pressure. And the green line is the turbine, or rather before turbine pressure. And you can see that it's rising up to about 3 bar. Also, you can see that from the point of it being fully spooled, it then starts to increase in pressure because, well, we are having our wastegate open, but it opens at an intake pressure of 2 bar, not an exhaust pressure of 2 bar. So what happens is the compressor side is asking for more and more power to compress the increased airflow of higher RPM to the same pressure, end pressure. But at the same time, the turbine needs to, well, it asks for more power, so the turbine needs to provide more power before the wastegate opens, and that means we have to increase the pressure in order to provide that extra power. So that happens to small turbines, especially, where you want to have an early spool, but then yeah, you end up with some detrimental pressure curves, let's say. I can give you Hans' ear if you and his knowledge about that if you like me to. But then below that, we have speaking about that, we do have things that influence these things, and that is the pressure after the intake and the pressure that is after the turbine, which means that it's before the exhaust system but after the turbo. So basically the amount of back pressure you have. And then the last one, we have the various temperatures in the engine. This one is a little confusing because it has both Celsius and Kelvin on the scale. That is to bring the curves closer together. We have Kelvin for the intake temperature, which sets it at 273.15, of course. That is 0 degrees in Celsius. And then plus 15. I run them at 288. Anyway, that's our standard intake temperature. The red line you see here is the temperature after the compressor before the intercooler. The blue line you see is the temperature after the intercooler. The green line you see is in Celsius, so that is actually a lot higher in this graph compared to those. Higher by almost 300, 273. Be exact, yes. And you can see that it's rising up to a temperature of like 800 degrees there after the combustion, but before the turbo. So, Kirov, that is good and all, but why is all that necessary? Well, actually turns out this is quite necessary to actually tune a turbo. It is a lot more difficult than it was in the automation that you know. Making turbos good is very difficult. And of course, I should mention that this is all just a single turbo so far. But that needs to be worked out first before we can do any fancier setups. But it's modular enough so that it should not take too long to make that happen. Anyway, let's take a look at a bit more modern turbo. I just quickly changed these values in code because hacking through them one by one with my hotkeys, that is taking a little too long. Anyway, we have arrived in year 2010, and we have a reasonable quality on that turbo and a slightly higher tune slider, so we are setting ourselves up for a bit more boost if we wanted to. As you can see through the compressor map, our spool is in a reasonably good point. We could make the turbine a little smaller. That is a point that I want to debate with you, if that is something that we actually do want and need, or and somehow need to cram it in there, or if that can be worked around. But So what you see here then is me changing the turbine size right now. We are currently sitting at 49 millimeters, and that would be the inducer size of that one, while the compressor is showing the exducer size. We have an AR ratio of 0.69, nice. And now we can try to increase boost a little, because we have our spool point right there, and that is looking good. Our pressure ratio increase is currently quite moderate. We are traversing in this while we are on full boost here in this segment. We are traversing some of the most efficient part of the compressor. So this is looking like it's pretty solid. Also, our spool happens throughout a reasonably efficient, as it gets down there in those pressure ratios, and a reasonably efficient part of the compressor map. Our engine looks like it has slightly too much back pressure at high RPM, at full boost, but you really need to make compromises there with loudness, of course. So this isn't overly so. The intake certainly flows well enough to support all this. There's a minor pressure decrease for the intake side. And that is something that you will see, something that I just recently discovered, so to say. That was the wrong hotkey, Carob, that was the turbine size. If we up the boost, then I was always of the opinion that this should be flat. Like, it was drawn in all the Garrett stuff and so on. This line here was drawn as flat. This is about where you go. But that's not quite true, right? Because, well, as you have higher and higher mass flow, the pressure on the intake drops. So if you're asking for the same absolute final pressure, then the pressure ratio on your compressor will actually increase. So this line is slightly sloping up, and if it's severely sloping up, then you should consider upping the size of your intake. And ta-da, yes, there is one good point of tuning. Well, yeah, if this is sloping up too much, increase your intake flow. If that's not the absolute intake flow you have, but rather the design limit of the intake flow. And on the other hand, if it's very flat, then you maybe should be considering to decrease it a little. But anyway, so this is a slopey line, and now we want to see what happens if we increase that boost. And what you see there is all the mass flow amping up, and soon, boom, there it will go poof, yes. There it hit the mechanical limit. This is really close to it. And what you can see there is that we are reaching an absolute pressure on the turbine side of almost 4 bar. That doesn't look all too healthy. It does traverse a good area of this, but this is looking like the compressor is just a little too tiny. So let's up it to 70 millimeters, and look at this difference. Look how much the pressure came down on that side, which will of course affect combustion as well, and with that your power output. Okay, Rob, I can't follow. Why do you say that? Well, that is because if you have higher pressure on the extraction side of the exhaust gases, then you can't as efficiently extract all the exhaust, all the burnt stuff. So more of it will stay in the cylinder and displace what otherwise would be a nice fresh intake charge. All right, but how high can you push this? Well, let's do a quality 15 turbo or something. Look at how this increases. Do you see the limits rise? You see those limits rise? Now soon we get a new scale here for the graph as well. Oh man, this is there you go. Now we're talking, right? Now we're talking higher pressure max. You can build some crazy stuff here too. So now Hans can easily, although he's going to dodge the best of this area. He can easily get some more bars out of this one. Let's see how many at quality 15. Oof, that goes pretty high. And there we're stepping it up. Soon we are going to hit some really inefficient area there with the compressor though. Like, awful. Oh man. I think we're going to explode the turbo soon. That looks like it's going to hit 6 bars very soon. Let's see. This is not the right tune. Oh, okay. I think this should actually be a failure condition. I'm reading in my my debug log that it's hitting 1271 Kelvin. That is too much. I think the turbo just melted. Yeah. That is a different... No, this is this temperature, yes. 1000 degrees. Maybe it just requires one more step, and then it goes boom. Now shredded the turbo instead of exploded. There are different failure conditions, but this certainly raises a few points of interest. We have left our compressor map. Its tune is at 50. That's not great for this, because that means it's not made for like high performance applications necessarily. Let's up that tune slider a little and see what happens. So we are increasing it there, and you see, oh yeah, okay. Spool point is getting worse and worse, but look at that. We're extending the compressor map in the right direction for what we are trying to do right now. And at tune 85, yeah, we no longer have our nice and easy to spool turbo, do we? Let me make the... Oh, that's the wrong way. Let me make the turbine a little larger. And there you go. Now we're like spooling through the heart of everything. But also, we have a turbo that spools at 4000 RPM. But look at this. We're now running a pressure of 2.2 bar, or boost of 2.2 bar. And we do have only a minor increase in the pressure on the turbine size versus the pressure on the intake side. So, looking good. What is not looking good is our exhaust, because that kind of back pressure is horrendous. That is almost 1.5 bar. And on the turbine side, of course, it works the same way as on the compressor side, where if you are trying to vent the turbo to a high back pressure, then the pressure ratio will be much diminished. So you need higher pre-turbine pressures in order to make up for it. Not great. So yeah, you need to watch your exhaust flow as well. Alright, I think this has given you a pretty decent overview of what is there at the moment. So let's talk about what is not there at the moment. What bits are still missing in the simulation. I'm currently working on various combustion effects of these pressures and cam profile and compression. I want to have a much better approximation of what is going on during combustion. And that will influence, these pressures will influence then the power torque curve. So that will be quite important. Also, it will of course influence the temperatures. So pressure before turbine. Also, one effect that is quite important, which we have not in here just yet, is that if you have very aggressive cams, your turbo will likely spool a little earlier than it would with a milder cam, because there is just such a strong shockwave of exhaust gases coming out of that high pressure chamber. Well, that is if the other side of the turbo, of the combustion chamber, i.e. right in front of the turbine, is lower pressure than what is currently inside the combustion chamber. Because yes, if you have more lift, then there is just much more area to flow through. And a sharper ramp will also contribute to that shock front driving an earlier spool, because it really impacts the blades at a higher velocity than you would have with a mild cam. And of course, the obvious thing is that we do not have any sequentials in here just yet. This calculation obviously works for parallel turbos. That's a no-brainer. You just kind of halve the engine and you have it. Or just give it the amount of cylinders and mass flow from them. And that's easy. You can easily do that. And you only need to calculate one turbo because the others will be the same. Well, in theory, but it is close enough so that automation doesn't have to consider any magics other than that. And then, of course, we have the twin scrolls, which are a little different. It would basically act like similar to a sequential, actually, without some of the, or similar to a parallel with with two different turbine AR ratios. That will be interesting to figure out how to exactly model that so that it's going to be easy here. But the calculations are all adaptable for that, so I'm not too worried about that. It's just figuring out how we exactly should be modeling this with what we have. Other than that, I think this is pretty much done in terms of turbo calculations. Of course, a little bit tweaking here and there, and there will be some issues popping up, but yeah. Then, of course, taking it from GameMaker over to automation, where it's going to be put into C++. The code in GameMaker is extremely readable and pretty simple, relies on functions and methods and all that stuff. So it's just pretty much a copy-pasta from here over to there, and then a little bit of a translation in between, but nothing major. One thing that is going to be quite major is one thing that I wanted to discuss with you as well. And leave your comments down below. Maybe you have ideas that we haven't come up with yet. And that is, how are we supposed to visualize all of that? In my little example where I went through the various graphs, what they mean, and then I adjusted this turbo to be a little bit more sporty, so that Hans doesn't get slapped on the fingers and explodes things. How are you supposed to be able to do that without having access to the compressor map, for instance? We did say originally that, this is all cool and stuff, but we really can't do this compressor map, this graph style just yet. That will take more time. So, do we have to have it? I think for the tuning thing that I went through, we absolutely do have to have it, because without this, there is no context whatsoever in what you're doing. Well, you can somewhat guess it from these graphs, but man, that will be tough. And this visualization of just, you see where it spools, you see its way through the compressor map, you see, it traverses the high efficiency part, and then the slope of this line, and where it ends up at peak power, and so on. That is super useful. Super useful to know if you have good tuning or not, and what you need to change. So we need some way of visualizing that. And 2D plots like this one, well, these are kind of 2D as well, two-dimensional, but what I mean is not just X and Y axis, but X, Y, and then an information contained in each pixel of that map. So yes, this is something that we don't have in automation just yet, and it would basically be writing your own texture, like calculating each pixel, rendering it to a texture, just like I've done here, and then displaying it as a texture, as a background to a normal graph. That's what I've done here as well. In GameMaker, that is easy stuff, basically. Pretty straightforward. In Unreal 4, these simple things are a little bit more complicated, and we're now thinking about how to solve this. Either we could aim for making something proper 2D, like 2D plot like this, or maybe it would be enough to abstract it for now by showing kind of this line and this line here, the choke line and the surge line, and then some indication of where the high efficiency part is, and then draw lines on there, which all of that we could do with our normal graphs. Would it be as cool and great as these compressor maps? No, it wouldn't. But maybe if that is the only thing that is doable for now, and we have to wait until 4.3 for having the proper compressor maps in there, then maybe that's what we have to do. So that's still a little bit up in the air. So if you have any ideas, let me know in the comments below. Also, of course, if you also, like me, think that these calculations look absolutely fucking awesome, then smash that like button for now. Yes, I sound like a normal YouTuber because I am. Not a very successful one, but yes. So let's move over to something else. What I wanted to show you is some of the tire stuff that we have been working on tirelessly. In other good news, there is the car AI generation available now once again, as well as, of course, the engine design. I don't think we ever had the car generator in Sandbox, but that is now a thing, and the engine generator also works. Alright, it's still a little crashy in there in the Sandbox version of things. I remember the program is working on that just on Friday. So, shall be forgiven. It's working in campaign. So, let's take a look at this. What I wanted to talk to you about is tires and how they looked very mediocre in automation up until basically now. And what I can show you is part of our little tire look revamp that we have going on. And that is going to be much appreciated. And you can see it here. It is visible for crossplay only so far. And I think everything but utility is working, or yeah, I believe so. Let's see. We are disabling the body. So, we are starting with semi-slicks. Look at that. Don't they look fantastic? There's cross-ply semi-slicks. And ignore the flickering. That's still something that we can't really fix there. We have tried. We've tried. Sports compound. Yeah. That looks like ancient sports compound tires. And medium compound. Yes, you get that there. Yes, that's nice. Hard compound. Economax, yes. And then we have the utility tire, which doesn't work. And all-terrain. Yep. That it is some offset there. Let's try to fix that. Is that maybe those are not quite right yet, aligned yet, but these are supposed to match, of course, in the tread. But yes, you can see that these are looking a lot more 3D because they are through tessellation and they're not quite supposed to look like this. But viewed from a little distance, they actually have some depth and such to them, which in general makes for a much better look. And I don't know why they are looking weird right now, because they did work before when I was checking this. But you can see where this is going. We're not that far off from having them all work properly, and that will be pretty awesome once they do, because they will look like proper tires. And don't forget that you had the extra customization options in the fixtures tab as well, where you could then tweak those settings further. So we had wheels was correct. Like the tread curve, you can make them all chunky, and lip thickness, you can scale that. Let's zoom in on that some more. Can we go there? Yes. And the wall curve, you can make them proper slim there if you wanted to. Like, all those options are available to you. But also, what you will find is that we are going to have white walls and various markings in different colors for these tires that also can be adjusted, most likely. And that will be pretty neat. There have been some examples around in this version. It doesn't seem like I can set those just yet. Let me have a quick look around. I do have the tire sidewall material here, but I think so far there is no proper material in there that is adjustable window. Nah. Yeah, now we have glass tires. It's special, but it's not good. So if you like see-through things, then there are materials for that. You can make your body see-through as well, which is pretty awesome. Instead of painting it with paint, you paint it with the window material, and you have a nice see-through version of your body. Excellent for showing off your interior with some nice photos. Anyway, yes, let's put plastic on there and make them white. This is not how it's going to work But yeah, sidewalls being white. There you go. No, it will be a lot better than this, where where a certain part of that sidewall can be colored to your liking, and also the text. Yes, so that will be good. Anyway, I think this episode is already super chunky monkey, and with that, I think we're going to say that it's enough for today. You've been waiting for the turbo calculations. You got more turbo calculations than you could handle. Admit it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and see you guys next time.